Nobody expected a service dog to destroy a lie in front of an entire courtroom, but that's exactly what happened. 30 seconds. That's all it took for one dog to undo 3 years of fraud. If you believe the truth always finds a way out, stay with me till the end. Comment: justice. If you think a fake disability case deserves everything coming to it. Marcus Bell had trained dogs for 11 years. He wasn't rich. He wasn't famous. He ran a small service dog training program out of a rented barn on the edge of town, matching veterans, disabled kids, and elderly folks with animals that could change their lives. His star student that year was a golden retriever named Scout. Scout wasn't just smart. He was gifted. Marcus had never seen a dog learn commands so fast, read a room so well, or bond so quickly with the people he was trained to help. Marcus had one rule for every client who came through his program: be honest about your needs. He built his entire reputation on trust. Dogs weren't toys. They weren't props. They were lifelines for people who genuinely needed them. Then Denise Calloway walked into his barn. Denise was polished. Expensive sunglasses. A cane she carried like an accessory. She told Marcus she'd lost most of her vision 2 years earlier after a car accident, and she needed a guide dog to help her live independently again. She cried when she said it. Real tears, or close enough that Marcus never doubted her. He paired her with Scout. For 6 months, Marcus trained Denise and Scout together. He taught her the harness commands, the guide techniques, the trust-building exercises that let a blind handler and a dog move through the world as one unit. Denise was a fast learner. Almost too fast, Marcus sometimes thought. But he pushed the doubt away. People adapt differently. Who was he to question her pace? When the program ended, Marcus handed over Scout's leash with a lump in his throat, like he always did. He believed fully that he'd just changed someone's life. He had no idea he'd just handed a con artist the perfect prop. 6 months later, Marcus got a call that made his stomach drop. Denise Calloway was suing the city's transit authority for $300,000. Her claim: a city bus driver had allegedly shoved past her at a crowded stop, causing her to fall, injuring her hip, and worsening her pre-existing blindness-related trauma. She said the driver mocked her disability when she asked for help. She said Scout had been the only reason she hadn't been seriously hurt. The case had gone viral locally. A blind woman, allegedly humiliated and injured by a careless city employee. The transit authority's insurance company wanted to settle fast and quiet, but something felt wrong to Marcus. He'd trained Denise personally. He knew exactly how a genuinely blind handler moved with a guide dog, the specific hesitations, the head positioning, the way real trust between dog and owner looked physically different from performance. And in the video clips circulating from the incident, something was off. Denise's head tracked movement. Her eyes followed people across the frame. She reached for a railing before her hand was anywhere near it, like she'd already seen it. Marcus watched the footage 4 times. Then he called the transit authority's lawyer and said words that would blow the case wide open. I don't think Denise Calloway is blind, and I think I can prove it in court. The lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Priya Nasa, didn't dismiss him. She'd had a gut feeling about this case for weeks. Denise's medical documentation was thin. Her ophthalmologist visits were sporadic. Her vision loss diagnosis came from a clinic that had, oddly, closed down right after issuing her paperwork. Priya asked Marcus one question that changed everything. If she's faking it, would Scout know the difference? Marcus paused. Dogs don't lie. Dogs respond to what's real. A trained guide dog builds behavior patterns around actual blindness. Constant physical guidance, specific dependency cues. If Denise wasn't really blind, Scout's behavior around her wouldn't match a genuine partnership. It would match something else entirely. A performance the dog had learned to tolerate, not trust. There's one way to find out, Marcus said. Get me in that courtroom. Priya smiled for the first time in weeks. Denise Calloway just requested a jury trial, she said. She wants sympathy points. She wants an audience. Then let's give her one, Marcus said. And let's bring Scout. 3 weeks later, the case landed in front of Judge Judy, a judge known across the state for one thing above all else: She could smell a lie before a witness finished their first sentence. Denise arrived at the courthouse with her cane, her dark glasses, and Scout at her side, looking every bit the sympathetic victim the cameras loved. She had no idea her own dog was about to become the star witness against her, and she had absolutely no idea what Judge Judy had already quietly requested from the court. Clark that morning, a request that would turn a routine negligence case into the most talked-about courtroom. Moment of the year, the courtroom was packed. Local news crews lined the back wall. Denise's lawsuit had already made headlines. Blind woman assaulted by city bus driver. And today was supposed to be her victory lap. Judge Judy entered without ceremony. No wasted movement, no dramatic pause. Just sharp eyes scanning the room like she was already 3 steps ahead of everyone in it. "Ms. Calloway," she said, voice calm and even. "You're claiming permanent partial vision loss, worsened by an incident with a city bus driver. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Denise said, dabbing at her eyes beneath her dark glasses. "I can barely see shapes anymore. Scout he's everything to me now." A few jurors visibly softened. Priya Nasa stood, calm and unhurried. "Your Honor, before we proceed, the defense would like to submit a request. We'd like Ms. Calloway's service dog to remain present and unrestrained near the evidence table during testimony, per handler protocol." Denise's lawyer, a smug man named Corbin Wexler, smirked. "Your Honor, that's just theater. My client's dog goes everywhere with her." "This isn't unusual. Granted," Judge Judy said simply. "Let the record show the dog remains present." Denise had no idea that request wasn't about comfort. It was about observation. The bus driver, a tired, soft-spoken man named Walter Higgins, testified first. He'd worked for the Transit Authority for 18 years without a single complaint. He described the day in question carefully, a crowded stop, people pushing to board, and Denise falling near the curb. "I never touched her," Walter said, his voice shaking. "I called out to ask if she was okay. She didn't respond right away, and then she started saying I pushed her." Corbin Wexler pounced. "Convenient story, Mr. Higgins, especially since you're facing termination if this case succeeds." Walter's jaw tightened. "I'm telling the truth." The jury looked unconvinced. Denise dabbed her eyes again. The room was leaning her way. Then Priya stood for cross-examination. "Ms. Calloway," she said gently, "can you describe in detail what you actually see when you look at a person's face?" Denise's chin lifted, rehearsed and confident. Shadows, blurs. Sometimes light and dark shapes, nothing more. "And you've had this level of vision loss for how long?" 2 years. "Since the accident," Priya nodded slowly. "One more question. When Mr. Higgins called out to you at the bus stop, how did you know it was him specifically, and not another passenger, who caused you to fall?" Denise blinked. I just knew." His voice. "He was the only one near me." "Interesting," Priya said, "because 3 witnesses placed at least 4 people near you at that moment." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Denise's composure cracked, just slightly at the edges of her mouth. Judge Judy watched all of this without expression, her eyes flicking every few seconds, not to Denise, but to Scout. The dog sat perfectly still by the evidence table exactly where Marcus had trained him to hold position. But something was subtly wrong, and only someone who understood service dog behavior would catch it. Scout wasn't watching Denise's hands. He wasn't reading her body for guidance cues. He was watching the door, the clock, the bailiff shifting his weight near the exit. A dog bonded to a truly blind handler stays locked onto that person, hyper-attentive to their smallest movement, because that person depends on the dog to navigate an unpredictable world. Scout was bored. Scout was distracted. Scout was behaving like a dog who knew on some fundamental level that his handler didn't actually need him the way she claimed. Judge Judy made a note on her legal pad, unreadable to anyone but her. Then she looked toward the defense table. "Ms. Nasser," she said. "I understand the defense has a witness prepared to speak to service animal behavior." "We do, Your Honor," Priya said. "Marcus Bell, Scout's trainer. Corbin Wexler shot up immediately. Objection, Your Honor, this is irrelevant. My client's medical condition isn't determined by her dog's mood. Judge Judy's eyes didn't even move toward him. Overruled. I'd like to hear from the man who trained the only witness in this room who can't lie under oath. The courtroom went dead silent. Denise's hand, resting on Scout's harness, tightened just slightly, and across the room, Marcus Bell stood up, walked toward the stand, and looked directly at the dog he'd trained, with his own hands and the dog that was about to tell the E. Truth Denise never could. Marcus took the stand and placed his hand briefly on the wood railing to steady himself. 11 years of training dogs, and he'd never once testified in a courtroom. But this felt different. This felt necessary. Mr. Bell, Priya began, how long have you trained service animals? 11 years. Over 200 dogs placed with people who genuinely needed them. And you personally trained Scout and trained Ms. Calloway to handle him? I did. 6 months, one-on-one. In your professional opinion, does a genuinely blind handler behave differently with a guide dog than someone who isn't? Corbin Wexler shot up. Objection. Speculation. He's testifying from 11 years of documented professional experience, Judge Judy said flatly. Overruled. Continue, Mr. Bell. Marcus nodded, steadying his voice. Yes, completely differently. A blind handler depends on constant contact with the harness. Their head stays low, tracking the dog's movement, not the room. They react a half-second behind everyone else because they're waiting on the dog to guide them, not their eyes. And Miss Calloway? Marcus glanced at her. She stared back, jaw tight. Miss Calloway's head tracks people across the room in real time. She anticipates objects before Scout signals them. In 6 months of training, I saw moments that concerned me. I told myself I was wrong. What changed your mind? The bus stop footage, Marcus said. And watching Scout right now. The whole courtroom turned toward the dog. Scout isn't behaving like a working guide dog, Marcus continued. He's behaving like a dog who's been asked to perform a role he knows isn't real. Real guide dogs stay locked onto their handler. Scout's watching the door. He's disengaged. That's not something you can fake because the dog isn't acting. He's just being honest. Denise's face had gone pale under her makeup. Judge Judy leaned forward slightly. Mr. Bell, is there a way to demonstrate this difference for the court, rather than simply describe it? There is, Your Honor. A simple visual obstacle test. If Ms. Calloway is truly unable to see, she won't react to a silent visual cue, only to Scout's physical guidance. If she can see, her body will respond before the dog does. Corbin was on his feet again, panic edging into his voice. Your Honor, this is a stunt, not evidence. It's a demonstration requested by a qualified expert. Conducted in open court, Judge Judy said. Her tone still level, still calm, still absolutely immovable. Ms. Calloway is welcome to decline. That refusal will simply be noted for the record. The room held its breath. Denise's lawyer leaned toward her, whispering urgently. She shook her head at him, then straightened her spine and lifted her chin. I'll do it, she said. I have nothing to hide. Marcus almost admired the nerve. Almost. The bailiff placed a small, silent object on the evidence table in front of Denise. At eye level, roughly 2 feet away, a bright red rubber ball. Nothing more. Scout sat calmly at Denise's side, harness in hand, giving no signal, no cue, no indication anything had changed. The room was so quiet you could hear the ceiling fans turning. Marcus watched Denise's face. For a genuinely blind person, nothing changes. No flicker, no reaction. The world simply stays dark, uninterrupted by a silent object placed just outside the range of touch. But Denise's eyes moved, just slightly. Just for a fraction of a second. Her gaze flicked toward the ball, tracked its color, and then snapped back forward, like she'd caught herself a heartbeat too late. It was small. It was fast, but Judge Judy saw it. The jury saw it, and the cameras in the back of the room saw it too. Let the record reflect, Judge Judy said, her voice cutting cleanly through the silence, that Ms. Calloway's eyes tracked a silent visual object she claims she cannot see. Denise's composure shattered. That doesn't prove anything, she snapped, her voice rising for the first time. Anyone can flinch. Miss Calloway, Judge Judy said, still calm, still quiet, still somehow louder than any shout in the room. You didn't flinch. You looked. There's a difference, and every person in this courtroom just watched you make it. Denise's hand slipped from Scout's harness, and for the first time in 2 years, the dog didn't move to catch her, because he never needed to. The courtroom erupted into murmurs before Judge Judy raised a single hand for silence, and the room obeyed instantly. Ms. Calloway, she said, would you like to revise your testimony? Or would you like this court to proceed with a formal medical review of your claimed condition? Denise said nothing. Her cane, still in her lap, suddenly looked like exactly what it was, a prop. Corbin Wexler tried one last move. Your Honor, a single involuntary eye movement doesn't constitute proof of fraud. My client may have residual light perception, which is medically consistent with... Mr. Wexler, Judge Judy interrupted, still perfectly calm. Your client identified the color and trajectory of a small object from 2 feet away in under a second. That's not light perception. That's vision, she turned back to Denise. I'm going to ask you one more time, under oath in front of this jury. Are you or are you not legally blind? The silence stretched long enough that Marcus could hear his own heartbeat. Then Priya stood, holding a folder she'd been saving for exactly this moment. Your Honor, before Ms. Calloway answers, the defense would like to enter new evidence into the record. We've obtained employment documentation showing Denise Calloway has been working under a different legal name as a part-time driving instructor for a private company for the past 14 months. The room exploded into noise. Judge Judy let it happen for exactly 3 seconds before her voice cut through it like a blade. Order. Now. Silence. Returned instantly. Denise's face had gone from pale to something closer to gray. That's impossible, Corbin said, staring at the folder like it might combust in Priya's hands. That documentation was verified this morning by the company's HR director, who is prepared to testify by phone if the court requires it, Priya said. Ms. Calloway has held a valid, unrestricted driver's license renewed 6 months ago. The renewal required a past vision test. Judge Judy looked at Denise not with anger, but with the quiet, exhausted patience of someone who had seen this particular kind of lie 100 times before, and was still somehow disappointed by it every time. You've been driving, teaching others to drive, for over a year, while suing this city for $300,000 over an injury to a disability you don't have. Denise's lawyer sat down slowly, like the air had gone out of him. Denise finally spoke, her voice small, stripped of the practiced tremor it had carried all morning. I needed the money, she said. The accident was real. I did get hurt. The settlement offers were bigger for permanent disability. I thought if I just kept the story consistent. You trained a service dog to perform blindness alongside you, Judge Judy said. You put a false disability on public record. And you nearly cost an 18-year employee his job and his reputation to collect a fraudulent settlement. She looked toward Walter Higgins, sitting quietly at the plaintiff's table, his hands folded, his eyes wet with something between relief and disbelief. Mr. Higgins, Judge Judy said, you may want to hear this next part sitting down. You're not the one on trial anymore. Judge Judy turned back to the full courtroom, her voice steady, unhurried, the way it always was right before she delivered something that mattered. This case began as a negligence claim against a city bus driver, she said. It ends as something else entirely, Ms. Calloway. This court finds that you knowingly fabricated a permanent disability, misused a legitimate service animal placement obtained under false pretenses, and attempted to defraud the city's transit authority of $300,000, all while nearly destroying the career of a man who did nothing wrong. She let that settle before continuing. This court dismisses your claim in its entirety, with prejudice. Furthermore, I'm referring this case to the district attorney's office for review of insurance fraud and perjury charges. Mr. Wexler, I'd advise your client seek independent counsel for what comes next, because I don't believe your firm will be representing her much longer. Corbin Wexler didn't argue. He simply nodded, already gathering his files, already looking for the nearest exit. Denise sat frozen, the cane still resting uselessly in her lap, the dark glasses finally coming off, revealing eyes that had seen everything in that courtroom perfectly clearly the entire time. Walter Higgins broke down at the plaintiff's table, quiet tears finally spilling over after weeks of holding them back. 18 years of service, almost erased by a lie. Restored in a single afternoon. You still have your job. Mr. Higgins, Judge Judy said, her voice softening just slightly. The only warmth she allowed herself all day. And you have something else too. You have the truth on the record. Permanently, Walter nodded, unable to speak, and shook Priya Nas's hand like she'd just given him his whole life back. Marcus stayed behind after the courtroom emptied. He crouched down in the hallway and scratched Scout gently behind the ears. You did good, buddy, he said quietly. Better than any of us. The dog leaned into his hand, calm now, no longer performing anything for anyone. Marcus made a decision that day that would change his program permanently. Every future client would be reevaluated every 6 months, not just for training progress, but for consistency, honesty, and genuine need. Scout would eventually be reassigned to a young girl in the next town who had been legally blind since birth, and who needed him more in 1 week than Denise ever had in a year. Denise Calloway was charged with insurance fraud and perjury 3 weeks later. Her name and her face spread across local news for reasons entirely different from the sympathy she'd once tried to buy. And somewhere in that same city, a tired bus driver went back to work the next morning, greeted not with suspicion, but with something he hadn't felt in months. Respect, because in the end, the truth didn't need a lawyer or a jury, or even a judge. It just needed one honest dog who couldn't lie if he tried. If you believe animals often see the truth before people do, subscribe for more real courtroom stories. Drop a paw emoji if Scout deserved a standing ovation.